In today's video, we're discussing the possibility of the Maple Leafs going after St. Louis Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly at the NHL trade deadline. Plus, is Bo Horvat done in Vancouver? Is a trade inevitable at this point? We'll discuss that possibility. Plus, we also have news from the NHL waiver wire, news out of Boston on the Mitchell Miller signing that's going to be investigated externally, and several other roster updates, including some injuries. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some pretty interesting trade rumors, to say the least, here to talk about a little bit later. But first, we have a few items to discuss. First up, the Boston Bruins announced today that they are hiring an independent firm to do a complete review of the whole Mitchell Miller signing. Of course, we know that the Bruins signed him, got a lot of backlash, even from internally from their own players, and essentially they've dropped Miller per se, but the contract's not invalid right now. Like, he's still technically under contract. It's not that simple just to void a deal like that. We don't know how this is going to work. They might be forced to do a buyout at the end of the season when the buyout window opens this summer. And of course, if that's the case, they will have a small cap penalty for the next few years on that. So we'll see what they do in that regard. But for right now, like I said, they've hired an independent firm to do a complete review of the whole situation. We know that President Cam Neely had been asked when he talked to the media after they confirmed they were not going to be, pursuing Miller anymore with the organization, when they were dropping him, I guess you could say. He was asked, is there anybody going to have any consequences, or, will anything come from the Bruins internally for making this poor decision? And he said they were going to do a review, and he wasn't sure. So essentially, this is kind of probably, I guess, a good way to have an independent third party do a full review, probably present to either Neely or ownership and see what they think from there. I don't know for sure if there'll be any consequences or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But the fact that they're even doing this is an interesting move. I don't think it's something they would have been obligated to do, but I think it's a good step to kind of restore people's opinion of how they do business there in Boston. Also, some news on the NHL waiver wire. The Islanders have placed forward Nikita Sochnikov on waivers for the purpose of being demoted to the minors. He's appeared in 3 games so far this year, and he's got no points and is a -2+-. So, not really working out so far, but he's had a limited opportunity. The Islanders, in my opinion, do have some prospects that are doing well in Bridgeport. Some are coming along a little slower than others, but they do have some interesting guys that maybe we'll get the next call-up opportunity. We'll have to see. But for right now, Sochnikov's on waivers. I would be surprised if he's picked up, but we'll find out tomorrow afternoon. We have a fine from last night's action from the early game involving the Islanders and the Senators. Senators forward Matthew Joseph got a $5,000 fine for a high stick against defenseman Sebastian Aho. So that's obviously the maximum allowed for that particular type of play in the CBA. Joseph himself actually had gotten a pretty nasty high stick, which resulted in a 4-minute power play for the Senators earlier in that game. But of course, that one did not result in any supplemental discipline or fine. Some roster news today. The Columbus Blue Jackets have gotten a few bodies back, which is good. Sean Corrali and Eric Branson will be able to return to the lineup. But in an interesting move, centerman Jack Roslovic is going to be a healthy scratch tonight. Kent Johnson's coming back in. So even with all the injuries they have in Columbus, certainly the coaching staff not afraid to send a message here and to use some tough love with Roslovic, who they haven't been pleased with, to sit him out and see if they can't get him back on track after having a little bit of a short absence. So we'll see how long the healthy scratch lasts for. I'm not sure if it'll be more than 1 game. Hard to say, but certainly a message being sent there, which is, like I said, real interesting with all the injuries. And when you can't play, that's quite staggering. Hopefully a big-time wake-up call for him. In Montreal, a few more injuries, including some guys that have already been out multiple times this year. Yoel Armia and Jonathan Drouin are both considered injured, and I believe are both placed on IR now. Armia shouldn't be out too long, according to the coaching staff, but Jonathan Drouin will be out longer. It didn't really say like it was going to be long-term, just longer than Armia, so it's hard to say exactly how long, but these guys just can't seem to stay healthy at all, which is not going to be good for their causes here, especially in Drouin, where he's a pending UFA, and many feel his opportunity to remain with the Montreal Canadiens is certainly coming to a close here, that he'll either be traded if they can find him a deal at the deadline, or if not, at the very least, he's not going to be re-signed, at least not by Montreal this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see how all these injuries are going to impact his future playing abilities. The Ottawa Senators are still missing Artem Zub. He was expected to hopefully be back on this latest little homestand, but didn't play against the Islanders. He's going to be out a little bit longer, and he likely won't return until they hit the road again here later in the week, as they do a West Coast trip coming up here shortly. So that's still bad news on a blue line that's also now missing Thomas Chabot. Jake Sanderson certainly picking up a lot of the slack, a lot of the minutes in their absence, but when you're missing your full top pair, that's certainly going to hurt, and certainly going to risk them, having that much more of a tougher hill to climb here to get some W's while they're waiting for some of these players to return. In Buffalo, Kyle Okposo, Jack Quinn also out. The Vancouver Canucks have placed Jack Studnicka on injured reserve. So he just obviously arrived in Vancouver not too long ago. I think he's done okay. I know he's gotten a few points, but now he's injured, so that'll slow things down in that regard. The Maple Leafs are bringing back Matt Murray. He's ready to be activated off injured reserve. He's supposed to play this evening against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And to do that, they've also had to demote Keith Petruzzelli, of course, back to the minors after getting a chance to ride the pine, I guess, as the backup at the NHL. Never got into the game action, but certainly filled a role in a spot. But still a good experience for him nonetheless, considering, earlier this year he was on an AHL-only deal. At least he becomes more of a call-up option. He was also dominant in the Marlies role prior to the call-up, too. So, obviously, it's a good sign for the future for him. And Wayne Simmons also gets technically demoted. I don't expect him to report to the Marlies. It's probably more just a paper transaction for the time being. Another news and notes here from Ottawa. Of course, the GM meetings are going on right now. And Pierre Dorion, along with all the other guys, there was a couple, I believe, that are absent from the meeting. I think there's 30 GMs attending this meeting. And Pierre Dorion was asked about, another home loss against the New York Islanders yesterday. Again, about the changes coming, and he doubled down to support his coach, DJ Smith. He says that coaching is not the issue in the Ottawa's Senators season and why they haven't had more wins. I will agree a little bit, but I think it's part of the issue for sure. I think the blue line, which I think Dorion has made it clear he's willing to take responsibility for. He made lots of upgrades. We called it the summer of Pierre. Lots of great moves. I didn't really have any issues with what he did do. It's just what he didn't do is now coming back to bite them and showing their weaknesses and exposing what they're capable of doing. So they need more help on the blue line, which we know he's working feverishly to find. He just can't find the right deals that are making sense to do. But don't look for a coaching change anytime soon in Ottawa, even though they added another loss to their record yesterday. Dorion supports his guy, and that has not changed. Bo Horvat in Vancouver. I know Craig Button of TSN recently said on Vancouver Media, I believe it was the Donnie and Daly show, that he believes that Horvat is done, that the contract is not going to come, and a trade is inevitable. There's some in Vancouver that believe the trade is not even going to wait till the deadline, that it's most likely going to happen before the Christmas break. Of course, Mike Johnson, who also works for TSN, chimed in on this recently as well, making some comments that he feels the ideal trade for Horvat might not be one of the common teams you've already heard in the rumor mill, that a team that's expected to be a powerhouse and contend for the Eastern Conference, possibly a Stanley Cup, in the Carolina Hurricanes might be the perfect fit for him. Obviously, the Hurricanes lost Vincent Trocheck as their number 2 center in free agency. They were kind of hoping a player like Kotkaniemi would step up and have more of an impact. That's yet to happen. Marty Necas has bounced back and been pretty solid for them, which is also good. But adding a guy like Horvat to that second line would be an absolute upgrade and tremendous fit for Carolina. I could even see the possibility of them trying to extend him, but at the very least, the rental situation would be a great fit. I totally agree with Johnson's analysis in that sense. I think it would be a tremendous pickup for Carolina. I have no doubt they'll try to make this work. It's going to be challenging for a lot of teams, of course, due to cap implications, but given the fact he's not having a new contract yet, he's going to make a lot more money than he is now, but you retain 50% on Vancouver's side to increase the value here, and suddenly you've got a player that you can get for under $3 million, and that's pretty appealing for a guy who's having a career season and scoring tons of goals. So we'll have to watch the Horvat situation, but like I said, with some Vancouver media feeling a trade by Christmas is all but done. Button feels he's done. The president, Rutherford, and general manager Alvin was in Toronto recently for the game against the Leafs. His agent is based in Toronto. They had no talks. There was other reports I seen saying that, I believe it was Frank Saravalli, saying that he had heard that the Canucks and the agent for Horvat had last spoken about 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about another player on their roster, and then after that business was taken care of, the agent asked, okay, should we talk about the Horvat contract now? And Vancouver said no, that they were not interested in talking about it at this time. So I really think that they've kind of made up their minds here. At least it sure looks that way. They surprised us with a Miller signing. Will they do it again? I don't know. It's going to get tougher to do. That Miller signing made things a lot more challenging for sure. And of course, another item here to look at is the Leafs. Mike Johnson, of course, the TSN who we were just talking about, made comments about the Horvat situation. Has also made comments on what he thinks the Leafs might do later in the year. He acknowledges that, a lot of people think that defense is the area they're going to add, especially given the injury to Jake Muzzin and all that. And that's not a complete stretch at all. I think it's a real possibility, and I would agree with people who think that. But Johnson thinks that there's also a missing piece up front, that outside of your big four, your supporting cast is not getting the job done. Even Michael Bunting's production is down a bit compared to last year. They have a guy like Alex Kerfoot, who's a real good player, but I think sometimes they have a hard time finding the right place for him in the lineup. And some of the other guys they've brought in to be your third and fourth line guys, it's not that they're doing a poor job overall. They're just not contributing much to the offense. That supporting cast, secondary scoring, is not quite, I think, where they expected it to be. And he suggests that they go after pending UFA and Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly. Of course, O'Reilly, an Ontario guy, born and raised, certainly would be quite familiar with the Leafs, has lots of family close by, might be a good fit. I mean, O'Reilly hasn't had a great season to start, but he's still a very capable player. We've seen what he did a few years ago with the Blues, winning all that hardware, including the Conn Smythe, the Selke. Like, he was just cleaning up and helped really be a huge part of them winning that Stanley Cup. And, maybe a trade to a team that's like, another hometown guy, home province guy going back, could be extremely rejuvenated and motivated to really kick things into high gear for another run. I don't know longer term beyond having a rental situation if they'd really stand any chances to keep O'Reilly, unless he's another player that signs for cheap, which I don't really know what the odds of that would be right now, because we don't really know what O'Reilly's future plans are, but he's still in his early 30s. I suspect he would want to get another contract and probably play for at least another 3-4 years, I would think, but we'll see. I mean, he's not at a point where we think he's finished, but the fact that his production has really tailed off this year is not a good sign. But, he's also missing David Perron, who was a big part of his success too in St. Louis, and just having a hard time adjusting here to some different line mates, and sometimes it just takes a while to find it, and maybe a change would be good. Can you imagine a three-headed monster down the middle of Matthews, Tavares, and O'Reilly? That's a pretty solid 1-2-3 centerman. The centerman is certainly a huge part of any Cup championship team, and to really win, like, that's a huge part of it, and that might be a way they go. I mean, Johnson thinks that might be just as important, if not more important, than adding on the blue line. But again, you still need to defend, and we'll have to wait and see, because certainly if Liljegren and Sandin can step up and really take some big steps, that might simmer things down and the possibility of them wanting to add on the blue line, and maybe would push them in this direction. But you'd think they'd have to probably give up a guy like Robertson, would be my guess. Maybe a first rounder, I don't know. I mean, O'Reilly's not having a great season, so maybe the price is not as high as it would have been before. I don't know. But still, with the pedigree he comes with and the experience, I would suspect that the Blues would still ask a pretty price. At the very least, a first rounder. Maybe more. Would they give up a top prospect like Robertson or Nyes or one of those guys to get this guy? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts if they should do it and what the price should be down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe. Stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.